Hi everyone. We are now in week 6 of community wellness, and again I just want to touch base with you on what you're going to be learning this week, as well as some things that have come up in assignments, hopefully to clarify some of the questions that I've received. As far as the assignment goes for this week, and again I am finishing the windshield surveys, which have just been really a lot of fun to look at. They are a lot of work, and I appreciate all the work that you all have put into it. Um, and I will be getting back to all of you within the next few days if I haven't sent my comments along. I'm trying to be thorough and really look at them in a complete way, and then following through from the data that you gathered, then following through and looking at what your areas for improvement are, and then your recommendations. What you should be doing this week actually is, and I think again last night you should have looked at two other windshield surveys from fellow students and made comments about them. And again, please be um, constructive and maybe offer suggestions. I'll be reviewing those comments this week as well. And then what your task for assignments is throughout this week, when we're looking at vulnerable populations, is to go ahead and put together your community nursing care plan. And again, what I would like you to think about is to take a problem that you saw in your community, and again, think of something that the community health nurse, the public health nurse, could have an impact on, and again, develop a community diagnosis. You have a chapter of Carpenito in one of the earlier weeks that is very nicely laid out and gives you some guidance about how to choose a community nursing diagnosis. Then you want to develop a short-term goal and a long-term goal for your concern. And I think I mentioned this before, but just to reiterate, short-term, again, would be looking at what you're accomplishing along the way. So if you're working on, and again, I'm just taking an idea, if you want to see the rate of one of the sexually transmitted diseases decrease, and that was your problem area from the statistics that you gathered from health and morbidity, and a short-term goal would be that you would, for instance, complete a presentation defining what the STI is, how it's contracted, how it's treated, and follow-up that needs to be completed, that you would give this presentation at X number of schools over the next 6 months. So that's your process kind of outcome. Then for long term, it would be, what do you want to accomplish by the end of this programming that you're putting into place? So in a year's time, you'd like to see the rate of this STI drop by 5%. That's just an example. For each of your short and long-term goals, you want to develop or cite 3 interventions that can be accomplished, and these should be evidence-based, and you want to cite your resources. And then your evaluation really would be, what kind of database do you need to review to see if your program was successful. So hopefully that will help, again, getting you thinking about putting that diagnosis and the actual care plan, community nursing care plan together. If you have questions, please email me, and I'll help you as much as I can. One other thing that came up, because some of you are certainly working ahead, is that you're looking at your agency review, which is, I think, due the following week. And this is just, again, after you've completed your practicum hours, you're putting together a review of what your experience has been there. That's very helpful for us. Gives us an idea of some of the sites that are very worthwhile, and maybe some that aren't, that don't work out quite as well as we would hope they would for students. One of the questions asked, and I've again had a number of different queries on this. I also have a small face-to-face group that's in a little bit ahead of you guys online. They're asking you to translate scholarship, or the rubric, I should say, is asking you to translate scholarship into your practicum experience. So my interpretation of that, and what I've been telling people, is, first of all, did you research any topic in community health for your site, for the mentor that you're working with during the practicum observation period? And another thing is, as you're putting your teaching module together, I should say, I don't know where that word came from, but as you're putting your teaching module together, which is really one of the last assignments that you have for this course, are you using evidence-based guidelines or interventions? So I think both of those would easily cover that interpretation of translating scholarship. So then just to talk a little bit about what's going on this week with vulnerable populations. This is such an interesting topic, and I really want you to give it some thought. Think about the groups that you've already interacted with in your practicum sites, and certainly the content in Lesson 6 does a nice job of getting you, again, to consider some of these groups that really are made vulnerable by many different conditions in their life. The ones that I certainly focus on are the elderly, definitely our homeless population. Most of you are working in Wisconsin, and I want you to think about the number of migrant workers that come into our state for periods of time during the year to help in the agricultural industry. Certainly the poor, and again, the very, what they consider the very poor, and some of their circumstances that they're living with. The mentally ill, because a lot of them are trying to live in community-based settings, and again, struggle with many different complications that they have. And then, because it was interesting when I was looking at your windshield surveys, some of the data that was coming across was still citing the number of uninsured in the zip code that you were working with, which I thought was interesting. It will be certainly interesting to see if those numbers continue to change with the Affordable Care Act. So I want you to give that some thought too. And then as you look at these groups, really take the time to consider what is it about them that makes them vulnerable. And further, as a community health nurse, how could we help them? What kind of programming, again, can you put in place, whether it's in a teaching, using a teaching intervention? I really continue to encourage you to think about this collaborative model, because that's really how we can have such a successful impact on people. You know, a lot of these problems that we're dealing with, a lot of the problems that came across in your windshield surveys, are not things that the community health nurse can individually go out and take care of. He needs to work with other groups, agencies, healthcare professionals in the community, again, in that collaborative model, and try to move some of these initiatives forward. One of the real interesting programs that I just saw talked about, again, in one of the windshield surveys, is in the Sheboygan area, and they, one of the hospital systems, and it's an Aurora system, is teaming up with Acuity Insurance, which is got a very progressive mind frame, and is just like known to be one of the greatest places to work. But they're teaming up together to try to tackle the drug abuse problem in the area, which is significant. And again, these people presently, if they look for treatment, typically need to go to the mental health unit at the hospital at Sheboygan Memorial. And it probably isn't always the best site for them, and the approach that these two organizations are taking is to really look at mental health wellness, and I can only think that there will be both outpatient and inpatient treatment and programs running once they get this off the ground. So at least someone is trying to make or to tackle this problem and make an impact. So think about those things. And again, we are moving right along in this course, and I'm going to end it there. Everybody's got a lot of work to do, and I will be in touch with many of you this week. So enjoy the week, and I'll see you early again next week, which will be week 7.